Kiss me before the ceremony, he whispered. Her kiss stole his breath. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Elara had always felt invisible. She was the kind of person who blended into the background, never the one to catch anyone's attention. For years, she had lived under the shadow of her more beautiful, more confident sisters, always pushed aside in favor of those with more power, more wealth, and more status. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, the grand hall of the Moonspire Temple was buzzing with excitement as the kingdom's most anticipated event unfolded, the royal selection ceremony. Young women from all over the kingdom had gathered to present themselves before Prince Caspian, the heir to the throne, who would choose a bride in front of all the nobles. Elara wasn't supposed to be here. She was only here because her family had sent her, forced her to attend in the hope that she might be chosen as a backup in case one of the other women was rejected. She wasn't even part of the real competition. No, she was nothing more than a shadow, a second-rate candidate who wasn't even on the prince's radar. Her dress was simple compared to the others, plain, in fact. She wasn't wearing anything special, certainly nothing that would draw the prince's attention. Yet here she was, standing among the other women, feeling as though she might disappear at any moment into the floor beneath her feet. As the ceremony began, the other women, radiant in their glittering gowns, stepped forward, their voices sweet and confident as they introduced themselves. Each of them had a story, a background, something to offer Prince Caspian. Each of them had something Elara didn't: charm, beauty, and a future. Elara, on the other hand, had nothing but her silence. She stood at the back, watching the others with a quiet desperation that gnawed at her insides. It wasn't that she didn't want to be noticed, of course she did, but she knew better than anyone that it was a hopeless wish. She had no family fortune to speak of, no lineage that would catch the prince's eye. Her heart beat faster as the prince's gaze swept over the crowd, his sharp eyes scanning each woman who dared to step into the spotlight. She held her breath, hoping he wouldn't notice her, hoping that, for once, she could go unnoticed, fade into the background as she always had. But fate had other plans. Prince Caspian, a tall and regal figure draped in royal blue, finally glanced in her direction. His eyes met hers across the room, and for a brief, fleeting moment, she felt as though the entire world had stopped. His gaze didn't just glance over her. It lingered, like a thread connecting them across the crowded hall. Elara's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't understand it, couldn't comprehend why he was looking at her like this. It wasn't that she was special, not in the way the other women were, but something about his expression stirred something deep within her. Could it be that he saw her too? Was she finally being noticed, in a way she had always dreamed of? Before she could process her thoughts any further, the prince's voice rang out, low and commanding, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Kiss me before the ceremony," he whispered, his voice barely audible but unmistakable. His words hung in the air like a spell, and Elara, too stunned to speak, found herself taking a step forward without thinking. She didn't know what possessed her, but in that moment, all she could focus on was the raw intensity in his eyes. He was waiting for her. The world seemed to fade away as Elara moved closer to him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no words, no response to his command, but as she closed the distance between them, she knew she had to do this. She had to give in to the moment, to the strange, magnetic pull that was drawing them together. She hesitated just for a second before leaning in, her lips brushing against his in a kiss that took her breath away. It was soft at first, tentative, but then it deepened, a spark igniting between them. For a split second, time stopped. Her kiss, gentle yet full of longing, seemed to steal his breath, and she felt a rush of warmth flood through her as his arms encircled her, pulling her closer. The prince, the most powerful man in the kingdom, held her as though she was the most important person in the room. She felt the weight of his gaze upon her, but it wasn't one of judgment. It wasn't pity or indifference. It was something else, something deeper. As they pulled apart, Elara couldn't breathe. She could barely comprehend what had just happened. Was it real? Did he truly want her, or was she just another passing fancy? The prince's eyes locked with hers once again, and for the first time in her life, she felt seen. "You're the one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're the one I've been waiting for." The words echoed in her mind, and in that moment, everything changed. Elara's life, which had been one of shadows and insignificance, was now irrevocably bound to Prince Caspian's. And the ceremony, which had once seemed like a distant dream, now felt like the beginning of something far greater, something she had never imagined in her wildest dreams. As the crowd erupted into applause, Elara stood there, still dazed by what had just happened. She had kissed him, and in doing so, she had sealed her fate. The prince had chosen her. For better or worse, she would never be the same again. As the applause echoed through the hall, Elara stood frozen, her mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The crowd's excitement seemed distant, like a faint hum in the background, while all she could focus on were the words Prince Caspian had whispered to her. "You're the one," he had said. Her heart raced, a whirlwind of emotions flooding her senses. She glanced at him, unsure if what she had just heard was real. But there he stood, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Prince Caspian, the man who had been the subject of so many rumors, the man who had never shown any interest in the common folk, was now gazing at her as if she was the only person in the room. I don't understand," Elara whispered, her voice trembling. The prince stepped closer, his presence commanding and undeniable. "You don't need to understand, Elara. I've known. From the moment I saw you. You are the one I've been searching for." His voice was low, but there was a firmness in his words that made Elara's heart skip. Her mind was still reeling, but his gaze calmed her, like a gentle wave washing over her. The ceremony continued around them, but Elara felt as if the world had stopped. She had been chosen, not for her beauty, not for her lineage, but for something deeper, something the prince had seen in her that no one else had. The realization hit her like a wave, and for the first time, she felt as though she truly belonged. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, but she couldn't hear them anymore. All she could focus on was Prince Caspian, the way he looked at her, the way his hand reached out to gently touch her arm, grounding her in the moment. "Elara," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "I need you to trust me. You are meant for something greater than what you know. This ceremony, this moment, it's just the beginning. We have a destiny to fulfill, together." Elara's eyes widened. She had heard the whispers, the rumors that surrounded the prince. Everyone in the kingdom knew that he had been searching for a mate, someone to stand beside him as he ruled, someone who could help him fulfill his vision for the future. But she had never imagined that person could be her. "But, I'm not like the others," she stammered, her mind racing with doubt. "I don't have the power, the status. I'm just an Omega. I have nothing to offer." Caspian shook his head, a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You have more than you think, Elara. You have a strength that no one else can see. You've always had it. That's why I chose you." His words, though simple, carried a weight that Elara couldn't ignore. She had spent her entire life being overlooked, treated as less than others. And now, here she was, standing before the most powerful man in the kingdom, being told that she was the one he had chosen. The weight of it was overwhelming, but it was also exhilarating. She felt something deep within her stir, a sense of purpose she had never known before. "Trust me," Caspian said. Again, his voice gentle but firm. "We can change everything together. I will help you find the power within yourself. You don't have to be like the others. You just have to be yourself." Elara's heart pounded in her chest. She had always thought she was destined for a life of obscurity, a life where she would never be seen or heard. But now, standing here with Prince Caspian, she felt as though the future was within her grasp. For the first time in her life, she believed that something greater awaited her. The ceremony had only just begun, but Elara could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on her, urging her to step forward into a future she had never imagined. As the crowd cheered once more, Caspian's gaze never left hers. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand gently in his. "Let me show you what the future holds." And with that, Elara stepped into the unknown, her heart full of hope and uncertainty. She had no idea what the future would bring, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. Together, with the prince by her side, she would discover the strength within herself and the power of the bond they shared. The world may have seen her as just an Omega, but Caspian saw something more. And that was all she needed to know. She was ready for whatever came next. Elara followed Prince Caspian as he led her out of the grand hall, the echoing sound of the crowd's applause fading behind them. Her heart was still racing, her mind spinning with disbelief at everything that had just transpired. She had kissed him, and in doing so, had sealed a fate she never could have imagined. The prince, the most powerful man in the kingdom, had chosen her, a mere Omega. She had always been overlooked, always told she wasn't enough, yet here she was, walking beside him, hand in hand, like she was the most important person in the world. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly as they walked through the palace corridors, the torchlight flickering off the stone walls. I'm not like the others." Caspian glanced at her, his grip on her hand tightening reassuringly. "You don't have to be like anyone else, Elara. You are exactly who I need you to be. I've seen it in you from the very start." His words were soft, but they carried a weight that made her pause. He truly believed in her, and for a moment, it made her believe in herself too. But the doubt still lingered in her chest. How could he see her that way? She had nothing to offer, no power, no noble bloodline, nothing that would make her worthy of a prince. "But I don't have magic. I don't have any special abilities," she said, struggling to find the words to explain her fears. "I don't even have the strength that the other women possess. I'm not like them." The prince stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes intense and unwavering. "That's exactly why I chose you, Elara," he said, his voice low and full of conviction. "The other women, they have power, they have strength. But you have something far more valuable. You have a heart that is pure, a spirit that is untainted by ambition or greed. That's what makes you special." Elara couldn't respond right away. His words were so different from what she had always been told, so different from what she had always believed. But there was something in his gaze, something that made her feel as though she could be more than just an invisible girl in the background. "I want to show you something," Caspian continued, his voice growing softer as he led her to a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The moonlight bathed the world in a silvery glow, and for the first time, Elara felt like she was truly seeing everything around her. "You see," Caspian said, looking out over the gardens, "the kingdom is not what it seems. There is so much more to this world, so much more to the role you will play in it. You may not have magic, but you have something far more powerful, your ability to heal, to bring peace, to calm those around you. That's why I need you." Elara stared at him, confusion swirling in her chest. "I don't understand. I'm just a healer. I don't even know how to control it." Caspian smiled gently, his eyes filled with understanding. "That's why I'm here, Elara. I will help you find your strength. I will help you understand the power you hold inside of you." His words filled her with a warmth she couldn't explain, as though something deep within her was finally awakening. She had always been afraid of her abilities, afraid of what they might mean, but standing there with him, it felt like she was beginning to understand. "There is a darkness spreading through this land, Elara," Caspian said, his voice growing serious. "A darkness that threatens to destroy everything we know. But you, together, we can stop it. You will be the light that pushes back the shadows." Elara looked at him, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't put into words. The fear and doubt were still there, but so was something else, hope. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she admitted, her voice soft. "I've spent my life believing I was nothing. How do I become something more?" Caspian placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm yet gentle. "You are already more than you think, Elara. You just need to believe it." As they stood there in the moonlight, Elara realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She had someone by her side, someone who saw her for who she truly was, and someone who believed in her. And with that, something shifted within her. Maybe, just maybe, she could become the person he believed she could be. Maybe, together, they could change the world. As the days passed, Elara found herself slipping into a new rhythm, one she never thought possible. The grand palace, which once felt so alien and distant, now felt like her new home. The halls that echoed with footsteps of the kingdom's elite no longer intimidated her. They welcomed her, just as Caspian had promised. She was no longer just an unnoticed Omega. She was the future queen, the one who would stand beside him, the one who would help shape the kingdom's fate. Prince Caspian, though a man of power and tradition, had shown her a different side of the world, one where she was not defined by her status, but by the strength within her. It wasn't just his words that gave her confidence. It was his unwavering support, the way he looked at her as though she could do anything. It had been a week since the ceremony, and Elara had been working closely with Caspian, learning the intricacies of the kingdom's inner workings. Every day brought new challenges, new revelations, but Elara faced them all with a growing sense of determination. The prince had made it clear that they were allies, partners in every sense of the word, and with every passing moment, she could feel the bond between them strengthening. But as the days went on, Elara began to notice something unsettling. Caspian's behavior had changed. While he was still kind and supportive, there was an underlying tension in his eyes, a sadness that he tried to hide whenever she looked at him. At first, Elara thought it was just the weight of the responsibilities he carried as the future ruler, but soon, she realized it was something deeper. One evening, after a long day of meetings and lessons, Elara found herself standing alone in the royal garden, the soft glow of the moon casting a silvery light over the stone paths. The sound of water trickling from the fountain was calming, and for a moment, she allowed herself to just breathe. But as she turned to leave, she spotted Caspian standing by the garden gate, his back to her, staring out into the distance. She hesitated, unsure if she should approach, but something inside urged her forward. "Caspian," she called softly, her voice hesitant. He turned quickly, as though startled by her presence, and for a moment, Elara saw the strain in his expression. "Elara," he said, his voice gentle but strained. "I didn't mean to keep you waiting." "You've been distant lately," Elara said, her eyes searching his. "Is something wrong?" Caspian looked away, his gaze fixed on the stars above. "There are things I cannot share with you yet, Elara," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Things I must face alone." Elara's heart ached at his words. She had always felt like an outsider, never truly a part of anything. But now, with Caspian, she had felt like she mattered. "You don't have to face everything alone," she said, taking a step closer. "I'm here for you, Caspian. Whatever it is, we can face it together." He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and pain. "I wish it were that simple," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "There is a darkness in this kingdom, Elara, a shadow that threatens everything we've worked for. It's not just an enemy we can fight with swords and shields. It's something far more dangerous, something that could destroy everything if we're not careful." Elara's heart pounded in her chest. She had known that the kingdom was not without its dangers, but the fear in his voice was unlike anything she had heard before. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern. Caspian took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "There are forces within my own court, forces who want to see me fail. They will stop at nothing to undermine our rule, to tear us apart. And the worst part is, I don't know who I can trust anymore." Elara's mind raced. She had always been told that power came with its own set of challenges, but this was something different. This was a threat from within, from those who should have been loyal. "How can I help?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear she felt building inside her. Caspian reached out and took her hand, his touch warm but firm. "Just being by my side, Elara, is more than you know. You have a power within you that you've yet to fully understand. And with your strength, we can stand against whatever comes our way." Elara nodded, determination flooding her veins. She wasn't going to let him face this alone. They were in this together, and she would stand by him no matter what. The prince had shown her a world she never thought possible, and now it was time for her to show him that she was just as strong, just as capable, and just as ready to fight for their future. As they stood there in the moonlight, the weight of the kingdom's future pressing down on them, Elara felt a shift deep within herself. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was a queen in the making, and she would do whatever it took to protect what they had. She and Caspian would face the darkness together, and no one could tear them apart. Days turned into weeks, and as the royal court prepared for the coming of a new era, Elara found herself in the midst of political intrigue and growing tension. Caspian's words still echoed in her mind. the weight of the danger they faced pressing down on her shoulders. The kingdom was not only threatened by external enemies, but also by those closest to them, hidden forces within the court who wanted to see them fall. Elara had never imagined she would be in such a position, but with every passing day, she felt herself growing stronger, more capable. She was no longer just an Omega, hidden in the shadows, waiting for a life she thought was destined for others. She was Caspian's partner, his confidant, and the woman who would help him secure the future of their kingdom. As the moon reached its peak one evening, Elara sat by a window in her private chambers, staring out at the stars. The wind whispered through the trees, and the quiet hum of the palace seemed to echo through the empty halls. She thought back to the first night they had shared a kiss, how she had felt so lost in the moment, unsure of what it meant. But now she understood. She wasn't just in this to stand by Caspian's side. She was in this to change the kingdom, to fight for what was right. She had learned from him, from his courage, and she was beginning to find the courage within herself. But despite her growing resolve, Elara knew they couldn't face this battle alone. The darkness that Caspian had spoken of was still out there, looming over them. The enemies were not just shadows. They were people, those in the court who would betray them for their own power. Elara had spent countless hours by Caspian's side, learning about the kingdom's inner workings, and every conversation, every plan they discussed, made it clear that there was no one they could trust completely. The weight of responsibility felt suffocating, but Elara could no longer turn away. Her time had come. That night, as she wandered the halls of the palace, lost in her thoughts, she suddenly felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly, her hand instinctively reaching for the dagger Caspian had given her for protection. But as she saw who it was, her grip relaxed. It was Caspian, his face shadowed by the dim light of the flickering torches. "Elara," he said, his voice soft but filled with urgency. "There is something I need to tell you. Something I've kept hidden from you for too long." Elara's heart skipped a beat. She had felt something was off for days, but she hadn't been able to place it. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caspian stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "There is a betrayal within our ranks. Someone close to us, someone I thought I could trust, has been working against us." Elara's stomach turned, her mind racing. "Who?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Caspian took a deep breath, his face hardening with determination. "It's Lord Corvus Ashford. He has been plotting with the enemies of the kingdom, working to see me dethroned and to claim the throne for himself." The words hit Elara like a blow to the chest. Lord Corvus had always been a trusted ally, one of the kingdom's most influential noblemen. To hear that he was conspiring against them felt like a betrayal beyond anything she had imagined. "But why?" Elara whispered. "Why would he do this?" Caspian's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with anger. "Power. Ambition. He has always wanted the throne, and he believes that with my downfall, he can seize control. He knows I will not bow to him, and so he is making his move." Elara's mind raced, her thoughts spinning as the weight of the situation sank in. They couldn't afford to let Lord Corvus succeed, but confronting him would not be easy. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Caspian looked at her, his expression softening for a moment. "We must gather evidence, Elara. We need to expose him before he can act, before he has the chance to tear us apart. But we have to be careful. If we move too quickly, it will look like an attack on him, and he will turn the court against us." Elara nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll help you," she said, her voice firm. "We can do this. Together." Caspian's gaze softened, and for a moment, it seemed as though the weight of the world had lifted from his shoulders. "I knew you were the one," he said softly. "You have more strength than I could have ever hoped for." The bond between them had deepened in that moment, and Elara knew, without a doubt, that they would face whatever came next together. As the night stretched on and the shadows of betrayal loomed ever closer, Elara felt a new fire ignite inside her. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was part of something greater, something worth fighting for, and she would stop at nothing to protect the kingdom and the man she loved. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty, as Elara and Caspian navigated the growing web of betrayal within the royal court. With Lord Corvus Ashford's treachery looming over them, they knew that time was running out. The prince had tasked Elara with gathering information, using her unique position to learn what she could from the court's gossip and whispers. The role she had once despised, the quiet, overlooked Omega, was now her greatest strength. No one suspected her. No one thought twice when she slipped in and out of conversations, overhearing key details that could prove crucial in their fight against Corvus. Elara worked tirelessly, her mind constantly racing as she pieced together the puzzle of corruption that threatened to tear the kingdom apart. Each day, she met with Caspian in secret, sharing what she had learned, but still, the evidence they needed to expose Corvus remained elusive. It was clear that the traitor was careful, calculating, and far more dangerous than they had first imagined. Elara's growing anxiety began to weigh heavily on her, but with every passing moment, she grew more determined. Caspian needed her. He had always needed her, even when she had been nothing more than an invisible servant. But now, she was part of something far greater, something that would change the course of their future. One night, after a particularly exhausting day of gathering information, Elara sat in the solitude of her chamber, her mind swirling with thoughts of their next move. The palace felt eerily quiet, as though it too was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, a knock at the door broke the silence. She stood up, her heart racing as she walked toward the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see Caspian standing there, his face drawn with worry. "Elara," he said, his voice tense, "we have to act. The time is now." Elara's pulse quickened. "What's happened?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Caspian stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I've received word that Corvus is preparing to make his move," he said, his eyes dark with determination. "He's rallying support, gathering allies among the nobles. If we don't expose him now, it will be too late." Elara nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had no more time to waste. "We need to confront him, gather the evidence, and make sure everyone knows the truth," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that churned within her. Caspian's eyes softened, and he reached out to take her hand. "You've become stronger than I could have ever imagined," he said, his voice filled with pride. "Together, we can do this. Together, we will make sure this kingdom stays in our hands." Elara squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of resolve. She was ready. They both were. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but with each other, they could face anything. "I'm with you, Caspian," she said, her voice unwavering. "Always." The two of them quickly set to work, putting their plan into motion. Elara infiltrated the court once more, her movements swift and silent as she gathered the final pieces of the puzzle. She overheard a conversation between Corvus and one of his allies, a conversation that revealed the full extent of their treachery. It was the evidence they had been waiting for. Elara hurried back to Caspian, her heart pounding as she handed him the documents that would expose Corvus for the traitor he was. Caspian's eyes shone with triumph as he read through the evidence, his expression hardening with resolve. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "We take this to the council, and we end this once and for all." With the evidence in hand, they marched to the council chambers, where the nobles had gathered for a meeting. The tension in the room was palpable as Caspian stood before them, his presence commanding the attention of every person in the room. Elara stood by his side, her heart beating in her chest as they prepared to reveal the truth. "My lords and ladies," Caspian began, his voice unwavering, "we stand at a crossroads. The future of this kingdom rests in our hands. I come before you today with the truth that I know none of you wish to hear, but truth that we cannot ignore." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the council, before he turned to Elara, who handed him the documents. "These papers," he continued, "contain the evidence of treason within our very walls. Lord Corvus Ashford has been conspiring with our enemies, seeking to betray the kingdom and take the throne for himself." The room erupted in chaos as the council members reacted in disbelief. Elara could feel the weight of every eye on her, but she stood firm, her gaze steady. "This is the man you have trusted," Caspian said, his voice rising above the noise. "This is the man who would see our kingdom fall, but I will not let him succeed. I will not let our people be led astray by his lies." The tension in the room reached a boiling point as Corvus stood up, his face contorted with rage. This is an outright accusation, he snarled, his voice shaking with fury. You have no proof. This is nothing but slander. Caspian's gaze never wavered. We have more than enough proof, he said, his voice cold. And the truth will be heard. As the council gathered around to deliberate, Elara felt a sense of quiet triumph. They had done it. The truth had been revealed, and Lord Corvus's plot had been exposed for all to see. It was a victory, but it was only the beginning. The kingdom was safe for now, but Elara knew that this was just the first step in a much larger battle, one that would test everything they had fought for. And with Caspian by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. The council was in chaos. Lords and ladies shouted over one another, some in disbelief, others in fury, but Caspian remained unwavering, standing tall before the assembled nobles with the damning evidence in his hand. Elara stood by his side, her heart racing, but her expression was calm. She had never been in a position like this, but the weight of the moment was clear to her now. The truth had been revealed, but the battle was far from over. Lord Corvus had been exposed for his treachery, but he wasn't ready to go down without a fight. You cannot prove any of this, Corvus shouted, his voice sharp and full of venom. This is nothing but a ploy, a way to tarnish my name and ruin my reputation. You have no evidence that connects me to any conspiracy. Caspian's eyes glinted with cold fury. I have everything I need, he said, his voice steady, but with a fierceness that commanded the room. The documents, the witnesses, the very people you've been conspiring with. It's all here. And it's time for the kingdom to know who you truly are. Elara could feel the tension thick in the air. She knew Corvus's allies would rally to his side, but there was no turning back now. The truth was out, and it was inescapable. As the council members argued among themselves, Caspian motioned for the guards to approach. Lord Corvus, you are hereby stripped of your title and all privileges as a member of this court, Caspian declared, his voice unwavering. You will be taken into custody, where you will await trial for your crimes against the kingdom. The room fell silent as the guards moved in to apprehend Lord Corvus. The traitor stood frozen, his face pale with anger and fear. He shot one last glare at Caspian and Elara before being led out of the room in disgrace. Elara exhaled, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. They had won, but there was no time to celebrate. The battle had only just begun. The kingdom was still at risk, and the enemy was far from defeated. As the council continued its deliberations, Elara and Caspian exchanged a glance. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, but there was still a fire in his eyes. This is only the beginning, Elara, he said softly. We've exposed one enemy, but there are many more lurking in the shadows. We need to stay vigilant. Elara nodded, her resolve hardening. She had known from the start that they couldn't trust anyone. The revelation about Corvus had been a shocking blow, but she knew they couldn't let their guard down now. I won't let anything happen to you, she said, her voice steady. We'll face whatever comes next, together. Caspian's smile deepened, his gaze softening as he looked at her. I knew from the moment I met you that you were the one, he said. You're stronger than you know, Elara. Elara's heart swelled at his words. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly valued. Not for her status, not for what others thought she could be, but for who she was. Together, they were unstoppable. The council finally reached its decision, and the room began to settle as they voted to support Caspian's leadership and the actions taken against Lord Corvus. Elara could feel the shift in the room, the moment when they had turned. The tide. The nobles were no longer questioning their authority. They had won the support they needed to secure the kingdom. But Elara knew there was still much to do. She had seen the tension in Caspian's eyes, the weight of responsibility that hung on him. This victory, though significant, was just the first step in a much larger battle. What happens now? Elara asked as they left the council chambers, walking side by side through the palace halls. Now, Caspian replied, his voice full of determination, we rebuild. We secure our allies, we root out the remaining traitors, and we restore peace to the kingdom. We can't rest until this kingdom is safe. Elara nodded, understanding that this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, a chance to shape the future of the kingdom, a future she would help create alongside Caspian. As they walked together, side by side, Elara couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had never imagined herself in such a position, but with Caspian by her side, she knew there was nothing they couldn't achieve. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and danger, but together, they would face it all. And as the palace doors closed behind them, Elara knew that this was only the start of a much greater journey, one that would test their strength, their love, and their ability to protect the kingdom they both cared for. The battle was not over, but with each step, they were closer to securing the future they both desired. The days following the council's decision were filled with both relief and tension. Elara and Caspian had exposed Lord Corvus's treachery, but the shadows of betrayal still loomed large over the kingdom. The nobles who had once been loyal to Corvus now looked to Caspian, uncertain and calculating. Though their plot had been foiled, there was still much work to be done to restore order and trust in the kingdom. As Caspian and Elara worked tirelessly to secure their position, they faced a kingdom divided by ambition, power struggles, and old loyalties. Despite the victory, Elara could see the strain in Caspian's eyes. He carried the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders, and the burden was heavy. They had won the council's support, but it was fragile, held together by thin threads of trust. The nobility was not easily swayed, and many still saw Caspian as a young prince, untested in the ways of leadership. Elara, however, had come to understand that her role in all of this was crucial. She had always believed she was too insignificant to matter, but now, she saw the power in her quiet strength. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. As the weeks passed, they strengthened their alliances, reaching out to the remaining houses who had not yet chosen sides. Elara used her position to build relationships, listening to concerns, offering counsel, and proving her worth. Slowly but surely, she earned the respect of the nobility. But even as they worked toward peace, a dark truth began to surface. Caspian's health was deteriorating. He had been hiding it from her for weeks, but Elara noticed the signs. The faint tremors in his hands, the dark circles under his eyes, the way he seemed to tire more easily. He pushed it aside, telling her it was nothing, that it was simply the stress of leadership, but Elara could see through the facade. She couldn't ignore it any longer. One night, as they sat together in the royal study, going over their plans for the next phase of their alliance, Elara could no longer hold back her concern. "Caspian," she said, her voice soft yet firm, "you're not well. I can see it. You have to tell me what's going on." He paused, his hand hovering over the map spread out before them. His gaze shifted to her, and for a moment, there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "It's nothing," he said quickly, but the lie didn't sit right with Elara. She stood and walked toward him, her heart pounding. "It's not nothing. You've been pushing yourself too hard. You need rest, Caspian. Whatever this is, you don't have to face it alone." Caspian sighed, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of his secret had finally caught up with him. He met her gaze, and there was a heaviness in his eyes that Elara had never seen before. "There's something wrong with me, Elara," he admitted, his voice low and heavy with fear. "I've been feeling it for months, and it's getting worse. I've been trying to ignore it, to push through, but I can't hide it anymore." Elara's heart sank as the realization hit her. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling with worry. Caspian took a deep breath, his expression grim. "I don't know yet," he said, his tone filled with uncertainty. "But I feel weak, like something is draining me, and I'm afraid it's getting worse. There are whispers, Elara, whispers that it's more than just illness. Some say it's a curse, one that runs in my family." Elara felt her breath catch in her throat. She had known there was something more to his struggles, something deeper than the pressure of ruling. A curse? She had heard the legends, the rumors that followed the royal family, but to hear it from Caspian's own lips shook her to the core. "A curse?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Caspian nodded, his face pale with fear. "My father, the former king, suffered from it. They say it started with him, that he was plagued by strange symptoms, weakness that no healer could explain. It was believed to be a curse, passed down from generation to generation. And now, it's happening to me." Elara felt a surge of protectiveness rise within her. She couldn't let him face this alone. "We'll figure this out, Caspian," she said firmly, her voice resolute. "You're not alone. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. We'll find a way to break this curse, or whatever it is that's threatening you." Caspian's eyes softened as he looked at her, a flicker of hope in his gaze. I don't deserve your loyalty, Elara, he whispered. You've already given so much, and now I'm asking you to take on this burden with me. Elara shook her head, stepping closer to him. You deserve more than you know, she said, her voice steady. I'm here with you, now and always. We'll face whatever comes next, together. As she stood there, her hand resting gently on his, Elara knew that they were bound by something stronger than fate. The future was uncertain, but with each other, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The curse, the betrayal, the dangers they faced, all of it seemed small in comparison to the strength of their bond. Caspian wasn't just her prince anymore. He was her partner, her equal, and together, they would overcome whatever darkness threatened to tear them apart. As the days passed, Elara and Caspian grew closer, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced the darkest of betrayals, uncovered secrets that could have torn the kingdom apart, and now, they stood together, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. Caspian's health, however, remained a constant worry. The mysterious curse that had plagued his family seemed to have a firm grip on him, draining his strength with each passing day. Yet, despite the heavy toll it was taking on him, Caspian refused to stop. He couldn't. The future of the kingdom depended on him, and he would not let it fall into darkness. Elara, however, had made a vow to herself. She would not let him face this battle alone. Day and night, she researched, seeking any possible way to break the curse that threatened him. She consulted ancient texts, spoke to the kingdom's most learned scholars, and even sought counsel from healers, but every lead she followed brought no solution. The curse was a shadow, elusive and deeply rooted in the royal bloodline. But Elara would not give up. As the weeks turned into months, they continued their work, preparing the kingdom for the changes that were yet to come. The once divided court was slowly uniting behind them, the nobles seeing in Caspian the strength and wisdom of a true leader. But beneath the surface, the tension still simmered. Whispers of the curse grew louder, and there were those who saw it as a sign of weakness, a vulnerability to exploit. As Caspian's health deteriorated, Elara's resolve grew stronger. She would protect him at all costs. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and plans, Elara sat beside Caspian in the royal garden. The moonlight bathed the scene in a soft glow, and for a brief moment, the world felt peaceful, as if the weight of their responsibilities had momentarily lifted. Caspian's face, usually so calm and composed, showed the strain of his illness. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for her, but his eyes still held that same fire, the same determination that had drawn her to him from the beginning. Elara, he said softly, his voice filled with emotion, I don't know what I would have done without you. You've been my strength when I've had none. I never imagined I could find someone like you. Elara took his hand in hers, her heart swelling with love for him. And I never imagined I could be part of something so important, she replied, her voice steady and filled with conviction. You are not alone, Caspian. We will find a way through this, together. Caspian looked at her, his eyes softening as he saw the sincerity in her gaze. For a moment, the weight of the world seemed to vanish, and it was just the two of them, united, strong, and unyielding. Together, he whispered, his voice full of emotion. You've made me believe in something greater than myself. The next day, Elara gathered the kingdom's most trusted healers and scholars, hoping that they might finally find a way to lift the curse. After hours of discussion and research, one of the scholars, an elderly man known for his knowledge of ancient magic, offered a glimmer of hope. There is a ritual, he said, his voice quiet but firm, one that has been lost to time. It's dangerous, but it might be the key to breaking the curse that has plagued the royal family for generations. Elara's heart raced. She turned to Caspian, who looked at her with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. What do we need to do? She asked the scholar, her voice determined. The ritual requires a great sacrifice, the scholar explained. It must be performed by the one who is cursed, and it must be done with the aid of their fated partner, someone who shares their soul. The bond between the two must be pure, and only then will the curse be broken. Elara's breath caught in her throat. She knew what this meant. It meant that the ritual would require both her and Caspian, and it would test their bond in ways they hadn't yet imagined. But it also meant that they had a chance, a real chance, of breaking the curse that had haunted Caspian's family for generations. "We will do it," Elara said, her voice filled with conviction. "Together, we will face whatever it takes." Caspian nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "I trust you, Elara," he whispered. "I always have." The ritual was set to take place under the light of the next full moon, and as the night approached, both Caspian and Elara prepared themselves for the challenge ahead. They knew it would be difficult, and there was no guarantee it would work. But they had come this far, and they would not turn back now. On the night of the full moon, they stood together in the royal garden, the ancient magic surrounding them like a tangible force. The air was thick with anticipation as they began the ritual, each step requiring them to focus their energy and their bond. The pain was intense, unlike anything either of them had ever felt. But through it all, Elara never let go of Caspian's hand. She felt the connection between them strengthen with every pulse of magic, and she knew that they were on the edge of something life-changing. As the final incantation was spoken, a wave of light surged around them, enveloping them both in a blinding glow. The curse had been broken, and as the light faded, Elara and Caspian stood there, breathless and trembling, but together, stronger than ever. The kingdom was safe, the curse lifted, and their future lay before them, bright and full of possibility. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. And as they looked at each other, there was no doubt in their hearts. This was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that they would write together, side by side, for the rest of their lives.